And even if we see the mother's signature, which she scripted as her signature, not because her name was Meera, but because she scripted it as the bird of peace descending on the earth. And there are two dots where she has put. And she herself has explained this, that the two dots actually stand for the two eyes. And because the eyes are something that reflect the soul directly, to look into the mother's eyes, whether it is her photographs or whether pictures. So when we look at the mother's eyes and we look at her gaze, and in most of her photographs and pictures we see that somehow, in an inexplicable way, we cannot define it, yet we feel that the mother is constantly looking at us. You know, each of my eyes works independently. One projects itself in the infinite to discover the future, and the other scrutinizes, sees, looks, surveys, explores, and arranges so that nothing escapes its vision in order to contemplate and to extend the grace. So when we look at the mother intently, sincerely, what she does is, वो हमारा परिचय हमारे सोल से कराती हैं, हमारे अपने अंदर सोल से कराती हैं. The topic that I have chosen, actually maybe you can say it's a sequel to something that we had discussed and reflected last month when we had discussed the mother's signature and what is the significance of the mother's signature. And we had also discussed that mother's signature is not only in the script of her signature, but it is in many things, her feet, her hands, and one of the very prominent, one can say, signature movements or signature, you can say, experiences of the mother was her luminous gaze. So hence the title for today's talk is The Mother's Luminous Gaze, or we can also say the divine's luminous gaze. We all have bowed down before the mother's photograph. We look at her, and one of the very striking things about the mother's photographs and her pictures are her luminous eyes. When we look at them, I'm sure we all experience certain things. Many things we can't explain also. Nevertheless, it is an experience to look into the mother's eyes, whether it is her photographs or whether pictures. So when we look at the mother's eyes and we look at her gaze, and in most of her photographs and pictures we see that somehow, in an inexplicable way, we cannot define it, yet we feel that the mother is constantly looking at us. It is not only that she is looking at me. If you look at her picture from any angle, even in this room, the mother's picture, you will always find as if the mother's glance is on you, and as if she is gazing at you and pouring something very precious on each one of us. That is the power of her luminous gaze. And there is a, one can say, a very big conversation of the mother with Mona Sarkar, who was her disciple, and he would often get into a conversation with mother, and a very significant of those portion of those conversations are actually on her signatures, like the script, her feet, her hands, and there is a long conversation of Mona Sarkar with the mother on her luminous glance, on her eyes, on her look. And a large part of today's discussion would be based on things which I have read from there, or I have felt or experienced. Also, whenever we look at the mother's photograph, I'm sure we can all relate to that. And the most beautiful part of this conversation is that the mother has actually given a very wholesome and very comprehensive description about her own luminous gaze. What her look can do, what her look stands for. What does she do when she looks at you? What happens when you look into her eyes and concentrate on her presence? And these are direct words, and Mona Sarkar, he has recorded these reflections, these conversations of the mother verbatim. So this is a very rich source for all of us, and it is here in this book he has written the Supreme. So the mother's luminous gaze. So the conversation actually started with the mother on a very simple note. He was sitting in front of the mother and he was looking intently at her eyes. And mother, he was looking at her eyes in a manner as if to absorb something at once, maybe gobble down whatever was coming from her eyes, and the mother could sense that. And then the conversation follows it starts in a very playful and teasing manner, where she says, "Why are you looking at me like this? It is as if you are trying to absorb something or gobble down something from my eyes. What is it?" And the mother laughs and teases him. And he says, "Yes, it is very true, because the things where you are manifesting are so immense and so many around me. I actually want to absorb everything of that within myself and make your presence within me very concrete. And I feel that this is one way where I can do it." So mother laughs, and Monada continues to look at her eyes, and suddenly there was something on the mother's cheek. An ant was crawling on the mother's cheek, because people used to offer her a lot of flowers, and the mother would say, "They don't even wash it." So the ants, they find their way sometimes on my cheek, sometimes on my hand. So he spots an ant and he removes it. And his concentration, that glance, gets a little broken. So then the mother herself, she remarks, "Oh, you were concentrating on my look, and now the concentration has got a little disturbed." And then she says, and she laughs, and there is a very beautiful thing where she says, I would like to read it as it is. "You see how this little ant has disturbed our concentration." So it's not that the mother was also looking at him very intently. And she says, "You know, if you could look straight into my eyes, concentrate truly, without moving, without thinking of anything, and with an intense determination to unite with my consciousness, to be in relation with this intensity of force which emanates from me through my eyes, then I can do much. If you are receptive, if you can absorb by remaining absolutely calm and concentrated, aspiring to identify yourself with me in an irresistible call towards this perfect union, you can be sure that silently I can lead you towards this unification with me just by the intensity of the force emanating from this look. So she's directly saying that her glance, her look has an intense force emanating from it. And if one concentrates on that, with full concentration, when we look into the mother's eyes, and I'm sure we all feel it, that whenever we look at the mother and look very deep into her eyes, it is as if whatever are the barriers or the obstacles which are between the divine and us, they suddenly crumble and they dissolve. And then there are certain things we experience, and we do experience this force, but we cannot define it. Because what the mother's force is so great, even if she shells out a little drop of her immeasurable love with her glance, we are perhaps not receptive enough, but we do feel the stirrings of that. And that is what the mother is saying. If you concentrate very deeply into my eyes, look into my eyes, then I will lead you to a union with myself. She goes on to say, you know, I work a lot. I do many things with these eyes, which reflect the soul. And even if we see the mother's signature, which she scripted as her signature, not because her name was Meera, but because she scripted it as the bird of peace descending on the earth. And there are 2 dots where she has put. And she herself has explained this, that the 2 dots actually stand for the 2 eyes. And because the eyes are something that reflect the soul directly. So even when she scripted that signature, she gave a lot of importance to the eyes. Here she says, I do many things with these eyes, which reflect the soul. These eyes communicate directly with your soul. It becomes like a bridge, and I transmit the force. It passes directly from my eyes like a ray of light, invisibly. Invisible for those who have not developed the inner vision. But it is in this way that I communicate and work to change the consciousness, the attitude, and to illumine it and guide it for the total progress of the persons whom I see. There are all sorts of methods that I use according to the individual cases. So she says, when I glance, I'm able to perceive everything, your past, present, future, everything. And then what is needed for you to open up your soul, I will transmit that directly to you. People who understand this, people who have an awakened consciousness, feel this very concretely and directly. And people who are a little unconscious feel it, but it is invisible. It is not so concrete. Nevertheless, once the glance has fallen on you, it is there, and it is there to work. Even if you have looked at the mother fleetingly, her force has become very active. The mother, once she said that sometimes, and it was also very prominent during the World War, she used to get a lot of calls, a lot of prayers. People used to call out to her, children, women. So they used to call out, and the mother says that whenever I hear a call, a very sincere vibration, a call from far, an ardent devotional call, it may be, or it may be a call made with a very sincere aspiration, she immediately sends an answer. And she says that the thing which works then is a direct emanation from me. And there is no formula, there is no formulation or method through which it works. It is so direct. And she calls this process as an oxymoron, I would say. She says it is indirectly direct. So even we cannot define it the way Mother has defined it. It is total and effective. And it is a direct and spontaneous emanation from me which directly reaches the person, even if the person is miles away from me. And she says that it is so total and effective because in such cases, in such sincere aspirational calls, there is a truth of the being which lays itself open in front of me. And then there is nothing in between that person and me. So my force is able to directly work on that and improve the situation. It can change the person altogether. It can bring new situations, and the problematic situation in which the person is, or the suffering that the person is going through, is, one can say, it is healed, it is cured instantly. Such is the power. Because the Mother says, when I work, I do not, in this kind of indirectly direct methods, I do not have to go through the mental, vital, and physical sheaths. I reach directly, overlooking everything. So there is no formula, process, method in between that person and me, between that call and me. There is an interesting episode during one of the darshan days. When the Mother was giving darshan, there was a lady, a very simple lady who had come to stay in the ashram, and she fell in love with the Mother, and she always wanted to serve the Mother. Now she had come with her family, and her family, after few months, they insisted that she go back with them, and she did not want to go back. She wanted to serve the Mother. So she was standing in the line for the darshan, and this episode where her family members were pressurizing her had just happened, and they were too insistent that now she has to, and there was no way, she had to go with them. So while she was standing in the line for the darshan, she kept on calling to the Mother. वो एक माँ अम्बे गौरी का एक वो जाप होता है ना, so she knew only that. And she told the Mother, I do not know any other way or any other prayer to call you, so I will call you. I know only this prayer. And she started with this, Om Jai Ambe Gauri. Whatever she knew, she started chanting that very ardently. And she was still in the line, and her eyes were closed, and she was constantly praying, and she was a little away from the Mother. And whenever the Mother would give darshan to anybody, she would also give some blessings packet, or she would touch them, bless them, and she would look at them. Suddenly, the Mother looks up very intently, and she looks directly at this woman. And even the Mother she's frozen. And that glance, all the disciples, they noticed it. Later on, they asked the Mother, Mother, what happened? She says, because her cry was so sincere, it reached me directly. And it reached me in spite of so many people being between me and her, so many thought processes, so many, people come with different feelings and all. It was there. But her cry was so ardent and it was so sincere. There was a truth of her being where she wanted to connect and be with me. So that reached me instantly. And that's why she says, I could not ignore it at that time. And many times the disciples have also reported, and it is recorded also, that often the Mother, while talking to somebody or giving blessings, she would kind of go into a trance. Because she constantly would get calls like this from various parts of the world. And if the call was very sincere, then it reached the Mother directly, and she was in the process of healing or sending the healing to that person directly. So, in her gaze pours out the Mother's words, She says, in my gaze pours out an immense love, and there is an infinite compassion. And the next passage, it is a part of the same conversation that is going on. It is a long conversation. So while the mother is giving a description of her own gaze and her infinite compassion, while talking to Monada, while she's explaining, she actually goes into a trance again. And the reason for this trance was that as she starts speaking about her own gaze and about the luminosity of her own glance, she actually identifies completely with Sri Aurobindo. And she starts describing Sri Aurobindo's gaze. And this passage is so beautiful. My child, I can gaze and gaze without wavering, and my gaze merges into the immensity and eternity of space, where time does not exist. My gaze explores beyond all things, beyond all existence, beyond all known realities, and leads towards that inexhaustible vastness where truth remains inexplicable, where nothing is formulated, yet everything emanates from there. It is the source and the origin of all terrestrial existences, even beyond the manifestation, something that cannot be expressed, yet it is the essence of an experience that has been lived. So here perhaps in this passage, when I read this, it seemed as if Mother is explaining to me what I experience. I cannot word it. I cannot even express it. And the Mother is wording it for all those people who actually look at her very sincerely. This is what happens. You know, she says, when I look and concentrate intensely, it is no longer I who look, but the Lord who looks through my eyes. Then I do not see any outer appearance, any material thing. All disappears from my view except the soul of the things with which I communicate, and that tells me everything in an instant. It is so clear, so precise, in a perfect perception, invariable, spontaneous, and true. In His vision, I see pass in front of me the things which have no real similarity to the things I usually see. That means in the outward world I may be seeing many things, but this is different. But it is real and seized by the eternal will. This look can arrest the course of events, change destiny with an unforeseeable power, annihilate the forces which oppose, create what is necessary for the new creation, and preserve what needs to be transformed to collaborate with the divine. This gaze is the gaze of the Supreme. And saying all this look of the divine consciousness in which love pours itself is an unending flow to save the world by an infinite compassion. And thereafter, she goes on speaking and she goes into a trance. And when she is in a trance, she is still speaking. These eyes measure. Now she's describing Sri Aurobindo's eyes, glance. These eyes measure, survey, sense, rather than see things as one sees them. His gaze, so loving, sweet, full of sympathy, pours out a divine compassion which relieves and consoles the miserable and agonizing earth that is trying to free itself from the clutches of the anti-divine and hostile forces. There is in his eyes the love that transfigures, the light that gives life, the energy which is released to protect, and the power to bless, to sustain, and to help in the progress. So much the glances are doing. You know, she says, I do a lot of things with my eyes simultaneously. There are several actions that are being carried out. So in one glance, a lot of things are taken care of. So she goes on to say all this, and then she suddenly glances at Monada again, and she finds him that he's still really concentrating on her look. She says, after some time, she reveals to him that I actually do a lot of things with my eyes. And what are those things? She narrates. I can transfix someone so that he does not deviate from the path. And it is often so. When we look at the mother, it is only her. We cannot even think of anything else other than the truth. There is a problem which I am facing, and if I look into her eyes, what is going to happen? She is going to make me realize things in a far deeper, one can say, not superficially, but I would be able to reflect on what I really need to look at in the situation. So this is what her glance does. So that another thing that it does is that the person speaks only the truth and sides only the truth. He surrenders or submits himself and does not revolt to my force. He starts collaborating with me. So the moment you approach with all sincerity and you look at her, these are the things which happen, which she does on you. She says that I can actually hypnotize anybody. I can do that. But often I do not do it. And here she says, I can hypnotize him, anybody for that matter, but I do not do it. I can communicate by subtle means to see the soul of the person, the veiled aspiration of his nature. My gaze, which passes beyond, penetrates and sees into the very depth of things, brooks no obstruction or barrier. The past, and now she reveals that when I look at anybody, everything about that person becomes clear to me. Even the state he is in and the possibilities in him. And when he sincerely appeals to me, I remove all obstacles and work towards the evolution. The past, the present, and the future accompany the person to announce the possibility of his realization and the progress he is capable of making in his terrestrial existence. So she says, I cannot hypnotize everybody. I can do it, but I do not do it, and there is a reason for it, and that's the reason. In a single glance, I see them before me, and his past, his immediate present, with the promise of his future, are revealed to me. I see many things and nothing escapes my view. When I see some things which want to transform themselves sincerely, I hasten their evolution. So when she looks at you, according to how much receptive you are and how much open you are to the transformation, she will pour her blessings through the glance and remove the obstacles. And wherever she sees that the being is ready to be transformed, then the work she readily turns him into an instrument of the divine. There is something very interesting. I used to think that it is a figment of my imagination when I looked at the mother's pictures or even Sri Aurobindo's photographs. I always thought, मुझे शायद ठीक से नहीं दिखता है or whatever. But often I had felt that when you look at their eyes intently, and I would here say scientifically, एक आँख देखिए दूसरी आँख भी देखिए. So दोनों आँखें, when we look together, I would often find that one eye, उनकी जो दृष्टि है एक आँख की वो थोड़ी अलग है और दूसरी आँख की थोड़ी अलग है. I always felt this thing and I just dismissed that as a figment of my imagination maybe. But when I read this passage, it was so interesting for me to read this and realize the mother herself has talked about this phenomena, and she says, it is interesting that those who know me a little perceive how one of my eyes is different from the other eye. And she says, each of my eyes works independently. Now here there was something of a discovery, so interesting, and I would like to read out this passage. You know, each of my eyes works independently. One projects itself in the infinite to discover the future, and the other scrutinizes, sees, looks, surveys, explores, and arranges so that nothing escapes its vision in order to contemplate and to extend the grace. In a single glance, I know the history of the person who is before me. All the elements which constitute his being, all the movements of his thought, his impulse, his activity, his attitude, his aspiration, his development, his possibility, all that governs his life, I know in an instant, in a flash of time. I do not examine them, but on his own, such is the power of both her eyes. On his own, he tells me everything that I want to know about him. So, it means that the barriers, whatever is preventing the person from opening to the mother, dissolves, crumbles, is shattered. It is interesting that those who know me a little perceive how one of my eyes overflows with love, spreads light, charges, and illumines the atmosphere with the divine joy, expresses the supramental consciousness, changes and witnesses the course of events and circumstances, brings peace and hastens the divine manifestation upon earth. How this gaze moves further and further and disappears in the eternity of time and space. She's talking of one eye. Now the other, whereas the other one concentrates and sees all that goes on inside as well as outside, judges and measures the value of the person, his attitude, and of course his possibilities of realization, and according to his capacities pours a bit of love, light, peace and power to prepare him so as to communicate with his soul. So when we look at the mother intently, sincerely, what she does is, वो हमारा परिचय हमारे सोल से कराती हैं, हमारे अपने अंदर सोल से कराती हैं, because she knows that once that is done, we will also, then there is no difference between the soul here and her. It is one then. So, and in a glance, I do all this. My eyes reflect the soul, bring forth all the qualities of the soul in its divine purity. So comprehensive is her glance, so wholesome, so larger than life is her glance and gaze. And we have all heard of the mother's balcony darshans, when she would stand on the balcony and look at the crowd who had assembled to get just a glimpse of her. And she would just pass her glance over all who were there and help in their transformation. And mother ने स्वयं कहा है that if I look at a person even momentarily, he is mine. मैं उसको अपना बना लेती हूँ. After that, all his responsibility is mine. So, when she would pass her glance from the balcony on the crowd, and there are cases which have been reported where instant transformations have happened with just a fleeting glance of the mother. She says, my eyes reflect the soul. They radiate the light and joy. They are filled with compassion and kindness, charged with the sweetness and benevolence that spreads all around to bless and comfort creatures and men. And this is what she has been doing from the balcony darshan. This look radiates and transforms all that it sees, perceives and touches and triumphs with an ineffable grace. So grace is all around all the time, but what her glance does is it makes the grace more tangible and effective for even a fractional glance from her eyes is capable of doing that. And there is an interesting episode, again, on a darshan day. Swami Shraddhanand he had come with his disciples for a darshan of Sri Aurobindo. And he was blind. Swami Shraddhanand he could not see. So, people were very curious, ये दर्शन के क्या दर्शन करेंगे? आँखें तो है नहीं. So, they actually asked him also कि आप कैसे करेंगे दर्शन? तो उन्होंने बोला, something very nice, so beautiful, he said. He said, अरे भैया, आँखें होती तो भी मैं कितना देख लेता. मैं तो इसीलिए आया हूँ यहाँ पर कि उनकी दृष्टि मेरे ऊपर पड़ जाए. So, I mean, they were all very, one can say, true disciples, I would say, of the mother and Sri Aurobindo, who could realize that unki glance, even if it falls on you, it can change, it can transform, it has that power. Somewhere the mother has also said that if you concentrate deeply into my eyes, you will get all you want to know, all you want to comprehend, and all you want to realize. Such is the power of her glance. ये conversation चल रही है. It's a long conversation with Mona Sarkar. And Mona Sarkar, he's still looking at the mother very intently. And the mother, after explaining all this about her glance, her gaze, she asked him, what? You are still looking at me like this? Are you challenging me? So he says, no mother, I am not challenging. It is my natural look maybe. Then the mother goes on to say, do you realize she's teasing him? She says, do you realize what I can do with this vision? I have only to look at you and think, let Mona be transformed and you will be transformed. Do you want to be transformed? So she's pulling his leg, or maybe she's teasing him very playfully, जैसे एक माँ अपने बच्चे के साथ करती है. And ये disciples भी माँ के ही disciples थे. तो तपाक से मोना सरकार बोल उठे कि mother, you are only saying this. Why don't you do it? I am ready. And the mother laughs and laughs and laughs. And she says, yes, one day I will transform you. This is my promise. But nevertheless, you will have to wait and persevere to become pure and sincere. But I assure you, one day I will transform you. And she says something very profound. She says, and she blesses him with one more secret. She says, since you are so curious about my glance, you want to know everything about my look, you are so fascinated with my glance, I will share one more secret with you. And she says, only I have the power to transform. I alone have the keys, the means, the methods, and the process. Wait with patience and perseverance. I have the powers, never doubt it. And then she says, I will share a secret with you. And she says, do you know, my child, the thing that I do through my look, without announcing, without anyone being disturbed, sweetly, very gently, full of affection and sympathy, do you know it? Wherever I have looked, and here is what makes her glance a signature glance. Wherever I have looked, I have planted an aspiration of the transforming force. I have sent a vibration of the divine consciousness. I have transmitted the power of an eternal joy. I have enveloped these things and beings with an immutable love. Wherever I have looked, everywhere, whatsoever I have seen or this gaze has fallen upon, wherever my eyes have glanced or have grazed the unfathomable horizons, or caught a picturesque moment, or traversed the skies, the stars and the suns, or directed a concentration of the consciousness towards all that is gathered by this eternal look, I have sent a state, a substance of the supramental consciousness, that which does not perish, but works incessantly to change the contents of these elements to the new consciousness. This look is filled with love, light, grace, and divine compassion. Voila. So, whatever is purely divine, sincere, and utterly divine, one can feel that only the divine himself or the divine herself can describe it. We are no instruments, no mediums, no processes, no methods to even come to one fraction of describing of what her look, her feet, her hands, or her signature movements they stand for. And whatever the mother has revealed, whatever Sri Aurobindo have revealed, either through their letters or through their correspondences or through their looks, as the mother is directly saying, glances, feet, blessings, whatever they have revealed and given us is only a fraction of what they have not revealed, the powers that they have not revealed, and the divine has a divine reason for not doing it. But whatever they have left behind for us are these things and these openings, and with an assurance, with a certitude, with one can say an endorsement, self-endorsement, with their signatures that they are here and doing the work of transformation in us. Sri Aurobindo in Savitri has written in the book of the Divine Mother something so beautiful. And they describe her eyes and what they do, just in 2 lines. Towards heaven, 2 tranquil eyes of boundless thought looked into man's and saw the God to come. Yet another 2 lines. A bliss, a light, a power, a flame white love got all into a soul immense embrace.